Well, hello, greetings, and thank you all for showing up. I can't really see any of you because the light's in my face, but I'm sure you're all people I know. Anyway, I'm Alan Wolk. I am the co-founder and lead analyst at TV Rev. If you don't know us, we are one of the leading analyst firms in the space. We have a newsletter that's free, comes out 4 times a week. We do special reports as well. And we do a lot of work with OEMs like LG. It's one of our companies we work with a lot. And I'll let Mr. Tony Marlowe introduce himself.
Right on. Tony Marlowe, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at LG Ad Solutions. And if you're not familiar with us, we have a network of almost 200 million LG TVs worldwide. And we use that platform to help push advertising on things like LG Channels, which is our fast channel native advertising. And so we're the monetization wing for a lot of that great CTV content and experience that our consumers love.
Right, and so what we're going to be talking about today are 5 key trends in the streaming industry, or 5 key trends that we can actually discuss within the parameters of a 30-minute conversation. There's a lot more, but I think these are things that you guys will find interesting and that are really hot. So one of the first things I'm going to start off with is something you just name-checked, which is LG Channels, which is a FAST service, and which is free ad-supported streaming TV. And let's talk about that. Like, why is ad-supported TV, so when streaming started, everybody thought, oh, well, that's the end of ads. Like, that was the beauty of Netflix and all these other services. You had no ads, but all of a sudden, ad-support is coming back with a vengeance. So why is that?
Yeah, and I think this is almost the trend to rule them all. And many of you will be aware of this, but it's the thing that underpins almost every discussion in CTV that you'll hear this week. And that is this shift to streaming. And I think for many of us, it really sort of coincided with the pandemic. So if you rewind back to 2020, following pandemic hits, we follow stay-at-home guidance. People started consuming more media. They started watching more TV. They started streaming more than ever before. And there was this hockey stick of adoption. But Alan, as you were just referencing, at that point in time, it was almost entirely characterized by subscription. So think of the original version of Netflix, for example. You pay your fee, get your content, there's no ads. Since then, so particularly since early 2022 through to now, there's been a second big shift, and that is the shift into ad-supported streaming. And the reason I say that this is important is because 8 in 10 Americans engage in this, meaning that they're watching ad-supported streaming. And the thing that really blew our mind, we have a piece of research literally called The Big Shift. We just did our 3rd wave. Almost 7 in 10, 69%, prefer ad-supported to subscription. And so you're talking about this is where attention is flowing, and there is now an advertising opportunity for marketers that just did not exist before. And that is why CTV is in the spotlight right now.
Right, so what do you think? I mean, I have my opinions, which I'll share after, but why do you think people are okay with watching ads on streaming now? Like, what are some of the big reasons?
I think it's a conflation of factors. One thing I would say is it's a model we've known for decades. Ever since in 1919, 1920, P&G did the first radio soap opera. That was the first time you kind of had this ad-supported model for media. Obviously television and cable has gone down that path for many years. It's a model that most people in Western societies are very familiar with. So I think familiarity is one, but then also there's just sort of the broader macroeconomic conditions. So you think of things, what we like to call streamflation. So the increasing cost of your streaming services, the increasing number of streaming services, people are really feeling the pinch of that cost. And so as people are starting to engage in things like subscription cycling, we've got more than 6 in 10 people say they do this, which is, if you're not familiar, this idea that instead of having 8, 9, 10 different streaming services that I subscribe to, maybe I'll have 3 or 4, I'll binge what I want, I'll kill that one or temporarily suspend it and move on to the next one. So this subscription cycling is a real behavior. And as they're doing it, they're supplementing it with these free streaming services because streaming is clearly the preferred method for consuming content right now.
Right, but I'll throw this in too, and I'm just curious what you think. So, I mean, to me, one of the big reasons also is that the ad experience is just better, right? Like, you can have the sound of a Coke can open. No, the ad experience on streaming, they've reduced, the ad load is much less, right? So when I watch, like a lot of people have been sort of tuning into the news lately, and you get on CNN, it's like, oh my God, there's like 5 minutes of effing pharma commercials and like I just want to shoot myself. And you realize, like, okay, like on streaming, it's like often there's a countdown clock, or it's never more than 2 minutes, and that helps. And then also because of targeting, they're able to like show me stuff that I might actually be interested in most of the
totally.
time. Yeah,
I agree with that. So there's ad load, and there's pros and cons here if we're really intellectually honest. But I believe the ad load is a very favorable thing, but then also the addressability. So with the traditional forms of television, if you're the media planner, you just bought it knowing there's an incredible amount of wastage. You knew that you had a target audience that was this, and you were really hitting an audience that was like this. So the wastage was incredible, and you're paying for that. Within streaming environments, you're more accurately able to give your message to a more precise segment. And so the wastage is lower, the value of each impression is higher, you can monetize your content with fewer ads. I mean, I think the con is the industry is still working on this. Frequency continues to be an issue. Again, for the media planner, this takes the form of wastage. You're over-frequenting a customer. For the consumer, it means you've seen that credit card ad for 15 times in the last hour, not a great experience. And so this is why we advocate for having an OEM strategy. It's what we call a direct-to-glass strategy. So if you work with, for example, LG and just one of the other OEMs, you've got more than 50% of TVs out there. Now, it's not a perfect solution, but it's a lot better than if you're working with 20 different OTT players. So frequency, I think, is something that we'll continue to get on top of. We've come a long way, but there's still a ways to go.
Right. Just to sort of build on that, one of the big reasons that the OEMs are so good at this is they have insight into what's being watched on streaming and linear. So one of the things that we're seeing now is that it's still mostly a hybrid model. You have people who watch streaming, most people, there's very few people who only watch streaming, and there's very few people who only watch linear. And most people watch a combination, and it shifts. If you're an NFL fan, you're watching a lot of linear during the fall, but then in the spring, you might be like, I'm catching up on all the streaming. So it's not a one-to-one. And if you work with an LG, a Vizio, a Samsung, Roku, you're able to sort of understand what they're watching on both linear and streaming, totally, which helps prevent that sort of thing where you see the same commercial over and over.
Totally, and for us, I think this is where you lean into ACR. For anyone who's not familiar, ACR is automatic content recognition. I like to say, if you're familiar with Shazam, it's like Shazam but on your TV. So there's a fingerprinting technology. For us, it's a combination of audio and video. You can identify the content, and then you're able to target based off viewership habits for that device. But when you're talking about the ACR, this sort of goes back to the addressability of it. Being able to match these households and the content they're watching, but doing so the biggest misconception is that it's just CTV ACR. ACR actually captures, I think of it as total TV in and then CTV out. So what are they watching on linear? What are they watching on streaming? And then also what's happening on the HDMI device, like gaming consoles, things like that. And those gamers are a really big audience. So being able to have a footprint of what's hitting the glass in a total TV environment and then crafting your CTV plan accordingly. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception with ACR, that people don't realize it's all-encompassing.
Yes, yeah, no, excellent point. So then I want to talk about sort of moving. So we're talking about advertising, but then we've sort of been moving on from other ways to monetize what's on TV. And one of the big trends that we're seeing now is this move to shoppable, which it's funny. It used to in the early. So shoppable is not a new concept. This came out in like the late '90s, and they used to call it Jennifer Aniston's sweater. About on the show Friends, there was this theory that you could stop Friends when it was still a first-run show and buy the sweater that Jennifer Aniston was wearing. And thanks to Netflix and reruns, people now know what that reference means, because there was this period in the aughts when you get blank looks from anybody under 30. Jennifer who? But anyway, so why is shoppable suddenly becoming a thing again? Like, what's different this time?
Well, as an accidental App Lovin' sponsor, and I promise this is water, as I cracked the can, I realized it gave a different impression. No, like 2024, in my opinion, is the year of shoppable. And I agree with what you said. The interesting thing about shoppable right now is not that the technology is new. Technology is not new. Right now, the predominant way in which shoppable goes down is a QR code, which has been around for a while. What's different is the consumer's readiness to lean into it. So there's also advanced ad units that can do things like, whether it's QR code or go to a custom landing page, build your own car, on your TV if you're an auto manufacturer, things like that. But it's the consumer's openness to the shopping experience. And it's been sort of a slow journey. So if you think about the viewing journey, it's about 90, I think it was 96% of people say they multitask while watching TV. So the shoppable experience has been one where we've been becoming very comfortable with shopping on the glass in your hand after being exposed to an ad on the television. It's the merging of those two experiences. And I think what's going to happen next is a more frictionless experience directly on the TV. So most people, it's around half, tell us that they want to be able to directly buy on their TV. Right now, what they're predominantly doing is seeing an ad and taking action on their mobile. But shoppable is changing the game. And then it sort of lends itself to this conversation. A journalist was asking me this question earlier in the week. They're like, look, is CTV a branding medium or is it a performance medium? And I believe it's both. It's what we call performance storytelling. You've got this medium is not your grandmother's TV. It is a brand new form of TV where you're able to build a brand and you can drive performance, you can measure performance, and you can be addressable in a way that was just not possible before.
Yeah, that always blows me away, because I've been getting that question too, and it always blows me away. It's like, why does it have to be one or the other? Like, for years, people have been using it for both, right? They've been, Nike just do it as a branding ad, but then Nike wants to sell a new sneaker and they'd run a product ad. So I don't see why it needs to be one or the other.
It's like the old El Paso girl, why not do both?
Yes, exactly. I would also argue that there are two big technological innovations that are pushing streaming. So one is, you mentioned it, is QR codes. Like, before the pandemic, no one knew how to use that, or 10 people knew how to use a QR code. Now, whether it's scanning a menu in a restaurant or whatever, people are familiar with it.
There's literally a QR code down here. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with it, but it's like right here.
Slido, anyway. And then the other piece is you have companies like Curve, that are actually able to go through the content using an AI tool and identify what's on there, and they will have a catalog from Walmart or other retailers, and actually identify items in the show that are for sale. And obviously the programmer needs to sort of make that happen rather than the advertiser, but they're still able to sort of identify things and sell them off of it. And the third thing I think is going on is Amazon got into this, and then everybody wants to be like, okay, well, we don't want to go through Amazon. How can we make this happen elsewhere?
I mean, before we move on from the QR code, even the ability to push multiple QR codes that are mapped to different executions or different parts of the media plan, it means you can measure what's working more than others, and it enables you to dial things up, dial things down, and optimize your media plan. Whereas even in the old form, or even in sort of broadcast, the QR usage is possible, but it's just the one QR code throughout the campaign, and you can't really control or know which parts are working more than others. So the measurability and understanding what is driving response can enable you to optimize your campaign as well.
Right. So then the next thing I want to talk about is AI, which is sort of part of this shoppable thing. And AI has been doing wonders. So TV, this is actually sort of fascinating for those of you who are not in the industry. When TV shows were digitized, they put no metadata with them, right? They literally, the file would be just like Seinfeld comedy, Seinfeld season 3, episode 4, and that'd be it. So they had no idea what was in the show. And this impacted everything from how you place the ads to even how you found the shows. And now all of a sudden, all these companies have gone through and they're tagging it, and they're able to tag the actors, the emotions, and what's going on in the scenes. And that's made everything so much better, and it's going to continue. But one of the areas I want to talk to you, which is discoverability, which has been a huge, huge issue.
Right.
And how is that impacting?
Well, maybe we can have a bit of an audience participation moment. We're going to have to ask you to just yell out, but I'm going to ask people for guesses. Between turning your TV on and then finally landing on something to watch, how long do we think that takes? Guesses. 15 minutes. We have 15. Hours.
I know that household.
I heard someone say 11. So according to our data, it's 11 minutes, 42 seconds, which is up from around 5.5 minutes this time last year. So discovery is actually taking longer than it used to. And it makes sense, right? There's a lot of choices. We're talking about the number of apps, the number of services you use. And I think AI will really take the sort of step into this conversation in two ways. One is discoverability, and the other is on the advertising side. We'll get to that in a moment. And actually, we just came back, not last week, but the week before. We had our second annual WebOS Summit in Korea. It's kind of like our developer summit. Everyone who sort of builds OTT apps all descends in this one summit, and we announced some big things. And at the WebOS Summit, we started to talk about really cool things like use of AI at the glass level for recommendations. So right now, you can get a recommendation in a given app. So app ABC, because you watch A, you might like B, C, D. But that sort of ignores all of the other subscriptions you have. It ignores all of the free services you have access to. What if your home screen just said, okay, here's what you've got access to. Based on your total viewing, here's what else you might like and you have access to. And I think that's where we're starting to go. I mean, even things like, and this is on public record, there was a press release, voice recognition. So on my LG TV, I might say, hey, find me some comedy to watch. It can now recognize that it's Tony's voice, so Tony's profile comes up. I don't need to log into my profile. Obviously, this is opted in. It doesn't happen unless you opt in. But things like that, AI is enabling a more frictionless content discovery. Now, also, this might make you laugh, but there's also a piece of it that'll never go away. I think someone alluded to it, the debate on the couch. Yes. Like, I don't think AI fixes that, but for actually finding what you want, I think it's going to speed things up. Now, I mentioned a second thing. I think also when you're talking AI for what we do, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the creative side of things. I think it's going to have, it's already having an impact actually, but a tremendous impact on creative creation. So now you can build like 100 creative executions, have your designers have a light touch over the top of the AI created stuff, test them all, use the ones that work and use the ones that didn't. This is an incredible change from what it used to be. A/B testing, and this is a corny, nerdy joke. It's almost like AZ testing now. You're doing the whole alphabet at once more. And that's going to speed up the journey to effective creative, right? Because you can know what works, what doesn't, without having to sort of do all of these manual hours. And then I think the other piece of it is the creation of segments, AI-generated segments, the collection of people that a human mind may not be able to understand what makes them cohesive. They're just going to convert better because the algorithm can understand this. And then the third piece of it, so you've got creative creation, segment creation, and then there's matching. Which segment is going to be best for which version of the creative? And that's something I don't think there's a human alive that could do that effectively at scale. And so I think that is not widespread, all three of those things together right now, but that is where we're heading.
No, that's good. I'd say the other thing that's happening too, thanks to AI and being able to tag everything, is it just when you sort of have an idea what you want to watch. Like, how many of you have, there's a show, you want to watch the Close Talker episode of Seinfeld, but you have no idea what the actual episode is called or what it was, that you can actually type in Close Talker Seinfeld and it'll find it for you. Or like, you don't know how Alexander Skarsgård's name is spelled. It's like a bunch of vowels in there and stuff. And like, if you're close enough, it's like, oh, I know who you're talking about, and it gets it. So it's going to make that sort of discovery so much easier as you're going in, and that's like a huge thing.
Totally agree.
In there. So I want to sort of shift gears now for the last bit. So local TV has become a huge thing. So, it's been said that with streaming, all TV is local because you can geo-target everything. But at the same time, we're able to, we have all this local, U.S. is such a big country, we have all this local television going on and people who want to reach local markets and are able to fine-tune this on digital, but on TV it's always been national, big reach, and also, how is local impact, the ability to sort of geo-target and hit local audiences impacting streaming?
Yeah, I think maybe this is sort of the sleeper. This is sort of the surprisingly sexy new thing that's going to happen. Really, it is in its nascency right now, but over the next 12 months, I think local is going to become increasingly important. So we mentioned ACR earlier. Now, one of the key things in order for ACR to work is to have essentially a fingerprint library in order to match it. So you can detect what's on the screen, but you need to match it to something to say, this is the piece of content or this is the ad. Now, particularly with hyper-local ads, your local car dealer, you may not have that fingerprint. Right, like we work with all of the names that the parties that kind of aggregate this information, but I think the push into local understanding will enable even more precision targeting. It'll enable local businesses to engage in CTV. And then I think what's coupled to this is programmatic. So local will be a programmatic sale, almost certainly. You're going to have these middling agencies. They're going to be hands-on keyboard. Your local agency will be buying the local media, and it will be CTV. And so I think that is going to become bigger than I think many people realize.
No, I agree, because we're starting to see basically what people, like a lot of people woke up, people who have, people who are getting VC money and have said, hey, if you all remember, during Cambridge Analytica, remember we were all going to boycott Facebook, and then they're like, well, you really can't because most of their money comes from small and medium businesses. And then the sort of next thought was like, yeah, but nobody uses Facebook anymore, and they're still giving them all that money. Why don't we move that to TV? So there's been a big push to get all these small, medium businesses, and this ties back to the previous trend of AI, which is that you can now make TV commercials using AI, because that was always the sort of sticking point, was production of TV commercials was expensive, and then a lot of these smaller companies have Instagram ads or YouTube ads that they can repurpose for TV. And I think it's, and it's all going to go to CTV, and that's going to be a huge sub-market because you can also target by zip code.
Totally.
Like we're seeing this, I'd love to talk about like political, how we're seeing this now like play out there too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love to talk about political. Can I just pick up what you just said before we get to political? Yeah. But I totally agree. So Facebook pioneered this ability for the long tail to engage in this mass advertising, right? So Facebook set it up so that you could buy on outcomes, but they would also have basically cloud tools that would build your ad for you.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people didn't realize that doesn't just translate directly to CTV. Like, previously, if you were to make a TV ad, you need a production company, you film things. It needs to be built. The actual ad unit needs to be built. And if you're a local hairdresser, say, in a very local market, you're not going to do that. You're not going to go to that effort. Certainly not to the same effectiveness as a larger company. Yeah. But now, if you can lean on AI tools to build a quality creative that can be deployed in traditional and CTV environments and buy it programmatically, it becomes a lot closer to that model that Facebook pioneered. And that is increasingly happening. So you're going to grow the long tail, and the interests of smaller companies are going to become even more, they're going to have a better ability to connect with their respective audiences than ever before.
Yeah, no, I am seeing, because given what we do as analysts, we constantly see all these startups, and I've been seeing a slew of companies that are basically looking at that, how to make and sell and optimize local TV commercials. And just think of it, Sura, which is AI, open AI's their video tool, that hasn't been rolled out yet. So once that gets rolled out, and improvements on it, like it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, but you had asked about political.
Yeah.
And I should say I am not a very political person, but I am. It's funny. One of our sellers at our company says we don't see blue, we don't see red, we just see green. But I think it's really exciting. This is so easy to not realize. This is the first presidential election, where CTV is in the game. 4 years ago, per some of the data we opened with, there was not really an advertising opportunity within these streaming environments. It didn't exist. It was not a part of the media plan. This is the first time where there's actually scale behind it. And we're seeing, and it's been, to say the least, like an unusual lead up to an election in terms of who's the candidate, who's been nominated, and that's sort of come a lot later in the game than typical. But you're seeing these political advertisers very much lean in. And you can do things like the hyper targeting, whether it's collecting zip codes within a certain electoral district so that the messages you're delivering are actually relevant to the audience that want to hit them. And traditionally, it was at the candidate level only that you could get that relevant. Now at that party level, they can be hyper relevant to everyone, everywhere. And it might even be your political message, what you want to say to one side of the aisle is a little different to what you want to say to the other side of the aisle. You can give people messages against what they think is important and help them understand. And this is transformative. This has been possible in digital environments. It's not been possible really, not at scale within traditional broadcast environments. And we're seeing it play out for the first time literally right now as the election cycle is underway.
Right. And the other piece of that is what it sort of ties into it, talking about local. You have all these down ballot races, right? If you're running for state legislator in New Jersey, you can't afford to buy broadcast TV in New York City, but you can buy a streaming ad that's targeted at the 3 zip codes that are in your state legislative district. So that changes the game there as well.
Yeah, it's fun. I could see someone in the audience, a colleague, and she said to me, "Don't talk about weather ads." I'm going to talk about weather ads. I love it because it's just an example that everyone can wrap their arms around. You're like, what does weather have to do with political? But we have a type of ad that's weather triggered, and say you're a hardware store. So my family is in Florida right now. Obviously, we're here. Beautiful weather here. Hurricane looming on Florida. If you're Lowe's, the ads that are delivered to someone in torrential conditions, maybe it's tarps, maybe it's leak sealer, are different to if it's sort of a summer-like environment here or California, maybe it's barbecues, maybe it's insect repellent. And the ability to understand the weather of where a TV is and then hyper-personalize an ad because of that is just one example. Political's the same. Yeah. You can ingest a data signal that could inform what will be more effective. And I just love that weather example because everyone can wrap their arms around it. I think it unlocks the power of it. And it's something a lot of our clients are already using.
No, that's good. And Tony is on the east coast of Florida, so he's not. Family is not directly in the path. So the last thing in the remaining time I'll talk about, which is another big trend, is operating system. You all may have heard that the Trade Desk is thinking of launching an operating system, and most of us have thought, what were they actually thinking? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But the idea quickly. For years, TVs were just these dumb boxes, and then then streaming came along, and you needed to have an operating system, and it took a while. You went through that sort of dongle stage, but now the operating system has become a big thing, and that really is the big battle now. Who owns the operating system, and why is that? Let's talk about why the OS is so important, the TV OS.
Oh boy, maybe we should have carved out more time for this one. So many reasons. So I mentioned this before, WebOS is the operating system that runs on all modern LG TVs, and it's what enables a lot of these native placements. So when you turn on the TV, there will actually be native ads that are different to traditional ads. It's also what enables a lot of the advanced functionality, and it's what sort of bubbles up various content. It's what all the apps kind of live on, like the operating system on a phone or a computer. Now, there's many reasons why it's important. One, which is a little academic, there's a psychological principle called, it's actually the primacy recency effect, but the primacy effect is if you're exposed to a series of stimuli, you tend to remember the first one the most and then also the last one. And the stuff in the middle doesn't sort of have as much effect. The OS is now the first impression. When you turn on your TV, that is the very first, it's like primacy every single time you turn on the TV. And there's debate about this, but there is a lot of research to indicate that first impression is worth a heck of a lot more than some of the other ones. So I think that's one reason. The OS is now your launchpad to your entertainment experience. I think also the other thing is, and I threw away that line before, CTV is not your grandmother's TV. TV used to just be this lean back experience. It kind of happened to you. You could change the channel, sure, but that was about it. TV is almost challenging its own definition now. It's a much more immersive experience where, sure, I could watch TV at its simplest form. I can choose content on demand, but maybe I'm engaging with fitness apps, shoppable moments. Maybe there's cloud gaming baked into my TV. It is a way more lean-in experience than it has ever been before, and it's powered by this operating system. And then, of course, with people's proclivity to lean into ad-supported models now, it means that there's an opportunity for a marketer to connect with people across all of this experience. And so the OS, as you say, the OSs are really unlocking this, not just for the consumers, and they are creating a better experience for all of us, but also for the marketer. The backdrop of this is also you're seeing, it's like what we call the death of the dongles. I mean, who plugs the thing into the back of their TV anymore? Like it used to be you had to do that to make your dumb TV a smart TV. As you're upgrading, TVs are super cheap now. You can get a 75-inch for like $500. People are upgrading. They're not plugging their dongle in, and the OS is becoming that launchpad to the experience. So you've kind of got the big factors and then the micro experience factors, and it's just so fascinating to watch it go down.
Yeah, and I'll just add in the last 30 seconds we have here, the other big thing is as the TV sets themselves become very commoditized, that there's no new innovations, the operating system becomes the reason why you might buy one brand over another.
True.
So anyway, we are now exactly out of time. So thank you very much, Tony, and thank you all very much in the audience.
Thanks, man.